hopefully. Live now.
All right, welcome to the Node.js Core Technical Committee meeting for July 19th, 2017. I want to thank Ali in advance for agreeing to take minutes. So we're going to start off with some announcements, then we're going to review the previous meeting, and then we're going to launch into our 5 agenda items. With the one announcement we have is Code and Learn. There's going to be there's one Code and Learn scheduled for Node Interactive in Vancouver in October. There's another one that's been announced for NodeConf EU in November. Matteo, do you want to fill in the blanks on this a little bit?
Yes, sure, Rich. Yeah, we are at NodeConf EU. We are hosting a Code and Learn. NodeConf EU will be from the 5th to the 8th of November as part of the conference. So we are also looking for mentors. There is a GitHub issue open on the Node.js-Code and Learn repo, so let's use that for tracking. And as far as I understand, there can be some budget to be allocated from the TSC for any collaborators that are listening. So if you want to come and help, we will be very happy. Otherwise, see you at NodeConf EU. I would like to also say that NodeConf EU lineup looks amazing, and it will be announced in the next few days. So. Hey.
Thanks, Paul. And just in case anyone's confused, Code and Learn is the event where Node.js contributors assist other people who want to start contributing with getting their first contribution in.
If any of you are planning on being there, just let us know.
Cool, and the link is in the minutes to the issue. Another thing that's being announced is the call with. Periodically, the Google V8 team and the Node.js CTC, and I think some of its TSC as well, have a meeting and to discuss things. We've had 2 of them so far, and there's a 3rd one being scheduled. Who wanted to put this on in the announcements? Was that Ali or Miles or someone?
Where's the link for that?
It was me that asked to have it announced. VA team would just like to do an update, like just general consensus around a handful of topics. They're mostly listed in the issue. This includes the turbofan and ignition stuff, but also a handful of other things that they're interested. But yeah, so we can figure out dates that work, and hopefully set up a call maybe in 2 weeks from now. It seems like a good amount of time.
Cool. Anything anybody wants to add to that? All right, awesome. Okay, the last meeting, which was I think over a month ago, we talked about noting end-of-life platforms, whether they're supported or not. We ended up having some discussion, but pushing the decision and discussion back into GitHub, and the pull request was eventually merged. That's Node.js/Node pull request number 12672, if that sounds like it's of interest. Okay, so that was the announcements. That was the previous meeting. The first item on the agenda today, this is the one that's been on the agenda the longest, discussing the Semver impact of error messages. Vanilla error messages, if we change them, we've always treated that as a breaking change because we know that people parse error messages, so we're probably breaking user code somewhere. James created an internal error system that would allow errors to have a code that never changes, and then the messages can change as needed. And there's been some disagreement about whether or not we can now consider message changes to be Semver patch, or whether we will only be able to do that at some point in the future, or whether we'll ever be able to do that. So I'm going to kick this over to James to see if there's anything else he wants to add as context.
Not a whole lot, other than we've been trying to work on getting these error codes introduced. Initially, my very first take at it was to try to do them all at once, and that proved unworkable because it just required too many rebases and constantly keeping up to date. So I decided to piecemeal it out and do individual modules at a time. Unfortunately, we've actually been having a bit of a difficulty getting those reviewed and landed quickly, so it's taking a longer time to get that transition open. Member major change requires 2 CTC members to sign off. Franziska and Michael Dawson have jumped in to help move that process along, but it's still rather slow going. In part because every time we land one, we have to go back and rebase all the others because it's all changing the same bit of code. So a little more of a concentrated effort to get those codes introduced would make this a lot easier. Given the current state, though, if we want to go ahead and keep treating message changes as Semver major until we get all of the errors converted, then fine. I mean, that doesn't mean we, as long as we're moving in the right direction, eventually we'll get there. So that's it.
Yeah, I'm kind of like, I think I was one of the people who commented that I didn't think we were necessarily ready to declare them not Semver major. Once we add the code, we need end user code to start using the code instead of the messages. And so, I was thinking we need a fairly good amount of messaging to the community and maybe some amount of time so that people can adopt using the error codes. And then once we're comfortable that we're at that place, then we can make them not Semver major. I'm thinking, once we get them all changed, then, we should be messaging along the way. Once we get them all changed, we should really be messaging saying, hey, as of release X, we're going to change our policy. So that's sort of what I contributed to the discussion. I'm always a little more conservative about those kinds of things, though. So there was some discussion about, maybe we could change the ones that have already been codified in, a previous Semver. Maybe they need a Semver release. Maybe they don't need to be anymore.
So one thing that is just coming to me right now, for those that have already helped with converting the error messages, is this a good first-time contribution, and is this something that can follow some sort of guide to do so? Because if that's the case,
it already all exists. James did a good job of writing up the guide. It's nicely laid out. So in terms of, yes, and a number of people have done it as their first contribution. I think the thing we could do is message that even more if we wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
It is a bit frustrating first contribution because of the fact that landing one requires others to be rebased, and there needs to be at least some coordination. So as long as it's messaged properly with the people that are doing it as their first contribution, that maybe a little patience is required, and they are Semver major changes, so they require more review.
Yeah.
We maybe pick a couple days or a weekend between now and October to essentially have a weekend where everyone's on hand. We don't do any other changes on core, and we explicitly do a push, because it feels like if we just took 2 days and focused on this and let people know, hey, there's mentors, pick one of these, and we're just going to get this all done, we could just kind of sprint through this at a relatively decent pace.
There's a code and learn in early October, just saying.
But that would be the only issue with the code and learn in October, Rich, which was actually what I was originally going to suggest, is I would love to see this done so that we can experiment with the Semver major stuff in 9, so that if it's a problem, we're able to roll it back before 10. So I would like to see this work done before October if possible.
Maybe some people can decide that they're a ad hoc working group and just schedule something and try to invite others. I'd certainly come to something if it was scheduled.
Yeah, I think for truly new people, it is a bit of it's certainly I don't know how major, but I'd say it's a big step up from the changing some strings, concatenating. getting the error messages and sometimes using the internal errors the right way, it takes a bit more thought. So I also not sure it would be a great fit for the Code and Learn.
Matteo, you have something you want to say?
Yeah, there is. We need some help on readable stream for this to happen, because as I noted elsewhere, and I spoke a lot with James as well on this, so it's nothing new really, but I'll just note, because it's good for the discussion, is that in readable stream we would like to have maintained the same code, the same error codes, but in order to do so, we will need to actually do we will need to actually be able to port the current system and make it run from Node 0.08 plus or even 0.6 plus.
So why? Like, I'd written a short blog, a little while back, just to encourage people to contribute more to the effort. One of the things I did suggest there was that if you have to support multiple versions, it may not be ideal, but you can basically change your code to say, if a code exists, then use that code. Otherwise, fall back to the string that you expected in previous release.
Yeah, it's not that. That's not the issue here. So the issue is that as we're changing the code inside core to use the internal errors, if we migrate to the streams code to use that, then it introduces a variance with the readable streams module itself. So the plan that I have is to and I've actually already started on this, is to have a standalone module, which is an implementation of the internal errors API that readable stream can depend on, so that it can, rather than doing a require internal errors with Flash, it'd be require internal dash errors as a module, and the API underneath there is exactly the same. So they can just take the code from readable stream, from streams inside core, and move it over to readable streams, and things just continue to work.
Okay. So it's an issue of maintaining it externally, not anything else.
Right. It would be the same error codes, everything else. Now, the problem with that, of course, is the fact that internal errors right now uses classes and that implementation would need to be ported back to work on Node 0, all the way back to Node 0.8, and also work in browsers. Browsers have rather inconsistent support for custom error subclasses, so we'll need to do some additional testing. The thing that's holding that work up is the fact that the error codes themselves and all the messages are rather unstable. So if I create that module now and publish it, I'll be updating it weekly. So ideally, we would get these error codes migrated as quickly as possible. I can produce that module, the standalone module, and readable streams will be able to use that as a dependency, and things just work.
As a complete different, following a completely, trying to see a different approach here. What if, as part of what if we, instead of storing the error codes in code, we store the error codes in a JSON file or something that can be actually processed, and we can actually say, hey, give me all these error codes, or I can read them from source, so that we can be part of the transformation phase of readable stream. Also,
incrementally, yes, I want to get to that. Get there. I mean, the original place where I first started with this effort was to take all the error codes and all the error information and having them sitting out in an ICU resource file somewhere. And was told, no, having them external was too complicated. Let's just start simple and just have them in the code directly. So that's where I ended up. If we ultimately get to where we can externalize these codes, then great. That's only part of the problem. The other part of the problem is the API itself, the new errors.error or new errors.range error, right? We want to reduce the variance between the code in core and readable streams. If we can have the same API implemented, we don't have to make any code changes. However, the actual error messages get loaded into the system.
Anyway, for me, please hold off to do this work on readable stream on the streams API before all of this is aligned. And also for me, the API, this error, changing error messages are still somewhere major, even after the code change.
So I'm going to ask that, is it possible that we can, I mean, this is all good stuff, but is it possible we can move it back to GitHub? The main reason this was on the agenda was just to make a determination about whether message changes in the new system are considered semver major or not. And it seems like there's consensus that for the time being, they should be. Is that wrong?
Yeah, through 8, I think we should make them keep handling them as semver major and revisit with 9.
Yeah, I agreed as well.
Okay, great. So I'll take the action item to note that in the issue that Raphael opened, unless somebody beats me to it. Feel free.
And I'm just going to paste a link in the chat for to a blog if people want to. If they look at that and think that's a good way to help publicize this effort, you can share it.
Okay, thanks. The next issue, and I'm just taking them in the order that they were added to the agenda. I think this one's going to be pretty quick. It's the ES module proposal that Guy Bedford put in. I think there's consensus that we ought to let it made a little bit more in the GitHub issue tracker and maybe pick it up next time in 2 weeks. Possibly inviting a guest or two to the meeting. Does anybody have anything they feel needs to be talked about right now with that proposal? Okay, great. Then let's declare that done. We'll leave it on the agenda for next time. Miles, I think you wanted the turbofan and ignition release plan and communication plan item. This is CTC issue 155. Is that right? Miles, if you're talking, you're on mute.
Hi, I was talking. So there's a couple different questions that are going on here. The first thing that we were trying to figure out was what is the best way to do the communication around the release. We want to make sure that people are aware of what's going on, that there's good communication, and also making sure that we give the foundation enough of a heads up that we can do a media push around the same time. So that issue was opened, and we pinged Zibby from the foundation, and the foundation pretty much seemed like they just need a couple days notice. If we give them even just a week's notice, that's definitely more than enough. Then the secondary issue there was some pushing and internal discussions around whether or not we should move forward with 5.9 or 6.0. And I know we have some alternating opinions. In fact, my opinion has been bouncing back and forth a little bit myself. Basically, we can go with 5.9 right now, but I think that there are some known regressions, and there's a concern from the V8 team as well that if we launch with 5.9, it may give people a bad impression of turbofan and ignition, especially since a large number of those problems have been fixed in 6.0. The stable branch cut for 6.0 is coming up in the next week, and then there's a public Chrome release calendar that I can't find right this second, but essentially, let me just see if I can find it. I can't find it, but it lists a public date of the release of Chrome, which is in a couple weeks from today. So like in less than a month from today, essentially, we have a fairly high probability of 6.0 being out in a release. So the hanging question there is like around, do we actually have anything to gain by getting 5.9 out earlier? And I know that we had people from the from the CTC who wanted to see it out earlier to catch regressions. But, you know, like on the flip side, since a lot of those regressions have already been fixed in 6, do we do ourselves any favors in, you know, like landing that now? Francisca, did I miss anything? Is there anything you'd like to add? If you're speaking, you're
No,
muted.
I think that was it.
Okay, and Ali, do you have anything to add from your perspective?
So, the getting more of more code through Turbofan, and if there's regressions that we haven't fixed yet, that will be found by feedback, those would be good to have. But at the same time, there's the risk that we'll get feedback about lots of regressions that have already been fixed. So yeah, it's unclear. I'm torn on this as well.
I guess the date looks like it's August 1st from what Anna posted in the chat. Is it likely, Ali, to hit, you know, do we think it's like plus or minus 1 week from that? I'm just trying to get a sense of like how long we're actually waiting if we wait for 6.
So this actually raises another question as to like what we want to do. So like, for what it's worth, like the stable cut is like in the next week. That's not the release of the branch, because the stable cut then goes into Chrome, which then gets tested, and based on whether or not there's regressions or other things that are found, that gets patched. But I mean, theoretically, and Francisca, maybe you could chime in as to like what you think the V8 team would see on this. Like, we can come up with a determination as to when we are comfortable shipping it. And, you know, if we ship it around the same time that the branch is cut stable, as far as I know, there'll be no ABI or API changes. There just might be new patches that are floated between then and the official Chrome release. And there's no reason why we can't continue to update that branch from upstream. Francisco, can you add anything to that if I'm mistaken?
I think that sounds about right.
Yeah, so if we are able to ship with 6.0, that would be better, because we'll be shipping something that's closer to the final thing that's going to be in Node 8 LTS. And any feedback, performance feedback that we're going to get is going to be a lot more pertinent as well. Like, it wouldn't have known regressions that we have fixed.
Can we ship beta release or release candidate between July 26 and July 27?
Ship where, like on, like in 8 or like on master?
On 8.
And are you talking about 6.0 right now, or are you talking like which?
A release candidate with 6.0, like 8.3.0 with 6.0 enabled, with 6.0 to actually, like, before we make it official, we ask the community for feedback.
I'm personally comfortable with it. I personally think that, to be honest, like, we're actually even helping the Chromium project by doing so, because if we catch edge cases there, we have the ability to have those fixed upstream and landed into the branch officially, not just as like patches that we float. So I think in general, we should really be revisiting a more like exact plan as to when we land particular branches of V8 into the particular release lines and into master. I think that's another call and another discussion for us to have all together. But I personally think that the kind of like split the difference on the two different approaches that were thrown out in that issue right now is to actually wait for the stable branch freeze, which is, you know, coming very soon, and land that and ship that in 8. And then any of the extra patches that end up getting landed between then and the official release of Chromium, we can just downstream the newer versions of V8.
So I think that sounds. I mean, that sounds like it's optimal for the LTS release. The downside is that it adds a bit of risk to people who actually use the current as their production release, right?
I wouldn't argue that it adds a ton of risk. I mean, at this point, once the stable branch is cut by the V8 team, it's primarily going out into smoke testing. So it is ending up in customers' hands at that point. It's just not fully rolled out to cover for edge cases.
Well, what do you mean? It's not like it's not in the which versions of Chrome have it and which ones don't?
Franziska, can you speak to that?
I'm not sure I understood the question, sorry.
I guess it's around the risk of using 6 earlier. And so it was, Miles was saying that actually 6 will be in some customers' hands, which I assume means that Chrome, some versions of Chrome actually will have 6 before that August 1st date that customers will be using.
So Chrome beta already has 6.0. It will promote to Chrome stable around August 1st. So if we ship a release candidate with 6.0, then we'll be in a very similar boat. If we ship an actual release with it, then we'll be shipping 6.0 maybe a week earlier than Chrome ships it. I think those can be independent. I don't think we necessarily have to follow the Chrome schedule for declaring a V8 version to be stable.
That was basically the point that I was trying to get across there. Was like, at the point that the stable branch is cut, the V8 team is declaring it stable, and then it's getting smoke tested more by the embedder before being released. So there's no reason, for example, that we couldn't start an RC process at that point and run like a 2-week RC with 6.0 to overlap with the RC process of the Chromium project.
Yeah, certainly the RC makes tons of sense to me.
I want to ask, why is August 1st been mentioned when the calendar mentions July 26th for the Chrome desktop release?
I think that was the year before.
Oh, can you drop the link that you're looking at in the chat?
Yeah, did that.
It was. I think that's where I got it from.
Yeah, so this lists August 1st as the stable date for the branch, 26th on desktop. I think August 1st is the targeted date for it to be on all devices, including mobile. It doesn't mean that will be the date, but what's particularly interesting there is the date above, which is the branch point of 60 was May 25th. Yeah, and we're looking at July 26th for like what they're assuming to be a stable release on desktop, which is very, very soon. And it may actually have a little bit more of a timeout from that when it gets released. But I'm personally comfortable with us moving into that process. And we probably do want to speaking to the idea of maybe shipping 5.9 next week, we probably should do an RC. So since the stable branch cut is happening, we could do a 5.3 RC with the 6.0 that's to that branch cut, run that RC for 2 weeks, and just update to whatever the latest version of V8 is right before we do the release.
I find it very hard to follow this by looking at the calendar. It would be much easier in a GitHub issue, and I'm not super comfortable pushing this release earlier than what we usually do. I mean, usually we're conservative with the stable releases, and I'm not really in favor of throwing out dates here in a meeting and then just rolling with it because nobody is fully aware of what the dates are.
There is one thing.
I'd have to agree with that. Another thing I'm looking at is that we are getting close to the 7.0 timeframe, and I'm actually going to be looking at starting cutting the 7.0 branch probably early September.
You mean 9.0 branch?
Oh, the 9.0 branch. Sorry. which means we're going to be starting the 9.0 release candidate process by mid to late September, release betas, that kind of thing. I'm not sure if it's going to make sense, given the remaining timeline, to push too hard on getting 6 into 8x. Maybe it's
the stable release cut is next week.
I understand. I understand, but if we're talking about having a several week long release candidate process, the time frame for 9.0 should also be considered. It might make more sense just to push.
Yeah, but that leaves us in an awkward position with LTS, right? And this is what we discussed when we originally decided this, was because in the future, there won't be really patches made for crankshaft and whatever the interpreter is called. So we're then stuck in this position where any patches that are for security stuff that we would otherwise float ourselves are going to be much more difficult to port.
No, we already went to TFNI. I don't think that's an issue.
Yeah, 5.9 has turbofan as well.
So we're talking about landing 5.9 and not 6.0?
The question was between 5.9 and 6. 6 is just going to be like, there's tons of patches between 6 and 5.9. At this point, I mean, James, to be honest, like just speaking to what you were saying before, like we should be likely running an RC with turbofan ignition before doing the either way. So we're talking about the difference of about a week if we want to cut with the 6.0 stable freeze, which is next week. So like personally, my gut is saying, and we should push this back to the issue, that we should just focus on testing and releasing 6 now and moving with the current cut.
So James, were you saying not go to 6 at all, or just not push for it now?
I'm saying that we need to at least consider not going to 6 at all in 8.
Because I think from the beginning, the recommendation was always there's going to be so many fixes, and I already hear people saying that, like, there's tons of regressions in 5.9 that are fixed in 6 that you wouldn't want to ship with 5.9.
I'm not. One thing I want to be clear. I'm not saying we absolutely should not. I'm saying we need to consider it.
So James, just so we're on the same page, though, like, what is the particular reason for sticking with 5.9 over 6 if they're both going to take the same amount of RC process right now?
I don't want to cause confusion for 2 sets of RCs around the same timeline.
But we have to do an RC either way. Like, are you saying we would ship 5.9 in Node 8 without an RC?
I don't think the RCs would be for the V8 version specifically, but we would do RCs for the new pipeline and those versions. I mean, halfway through those RCs, we could bump to 6.0. It wouldn't really matter, I don't think.
I mean, frankly, there's already been RC V8 5.9.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
Back to GitHub, or do we want to try to come to some decision on something right now?
Yeah, I don't think that we're going to reach consensus right now. I think we should put it back to GitHub, but please, if people could chime in on that issue, because some people wanted to ship with 5.9 as early as next week. And I guess I was forgetting the fact that Anna has been running an RC for multiple weeks with 5.9. So that's worth considering.
Okay, great. Next up, going into ordering the release working group. I think this was Michael Dawson's issue.
I just put it on the agenda. Basically the LTS working group's been working without a charter. There was an effort that there was some, a PR to charter it way long back, but we never actually closed on that. In the recent discussions, the consensus was that we should probably charter it with a greater scope than just LTS. So it ended up being a charter for the release working group, which includes LTS, the release team, and even the SIGIM team, who, with the SIGIM being one of the tools used to validate the releases. There's been a fair amount of discussion. There's probably still a little bit of discussion to, refinement on the charter itself, but I think it's close enough to what it certainly captures the scope and sort of responsibilities that would be delegated. And so I added it on here because I think we want, some feedback from the CTC to say, yes, we're comfortable with that scope, or, or not. So basically give that first, yes, the CTC is willing to charter a team like that or not. So we don't necessarily need to discuss it, in detail here, but I wanted to mention it and make sure that people go and take a look at it and comment on it so that we get moving on that.
I'll add a CTC review label to it right now.
Okay. Yeah, I thought about doing that. I just wanted to also make sure we talked about it here as well. So I don't know if anybody has, if anybody has any questions and stuff like that, I think we can answer them or discuss them now. But if not, it's basically review the issue in GitHub and comment.
I also removed the agenda label, but feel free to re-add it at any time.
Sure, once it's ready again, we'll do that.
Let's say, just initially, does anybody on the call have any reservations about this approach? Hearing none.
I think everybody would like to see that working group actually chartered. It's just a matter of taking the time to read the charter and.
Yeah, I don't think. Anyway, I think yeah. So basically, it's people can read, give comments. I'm hoping that there's been enough discussion that there won't be any major objections to what's there.
Okay, then if there are no objections, I'm going to move on to the last item on the agenda, which Miles put on at the last minute here. I'm not sure how much we're going to be able to cover with it, but let's try. Consider using another option like Google Meet instead of Uber Conference. Do you want to have this conversation right now, Miles, or do you want to just make a note that we need to open an issue or something, or how do you want to handle this? You are muted.
I'm no longer muted. Okay. So quick one on it, basically I can set up a Google Meet that we can use. Google Meet is very similar to Uber Conference. It gives you a number that you can dial in with if you want to go by phone, or you can go in via the message. It does video, much like Hangouts, kind of the next version of Hangouts. If a Google employee sets it up, I've been told we can do it, and we can use it publicly, and it can support up to 50 people. It's free. I believe we would have more granular control over people who would be able to come in and manage it and make sure that the people who are going in are the people who should go in, because it's explicitly invite only. You can make it. It has built-in recording, similar to what we have on here, although I believe it would also record the video, which is a nice addition. As far as I know, it does not have broadcast to YouTube like Hangouts yet. I can do more internal searches, but either way, it puts us in no different a position than Uber Conference if we were to do it. If people are open to it, we could do just a little test. I would be more than happy to handle running just a test meeting on Meet, just to make sure that it would handle our needs. But I think the very simple proposal would just be, hey, why don't we try using Google Meet for the next CTC meeting? And then if it works, great. And if it's a pain, just move back to Uber Conference.
Does it affect our, and maybe Jeremiah knows the best answer, is there any effect on how we currently stream? You depend on anything that's related to Uber Conference, or do you think it'll just likely work?
No, there's not, I mean, so long as it provides audio to the desktop. Yeah. I mean, the current way we stream, even if you just use one computer, you can capture basically anything that would have audio and potentially anything you want video-wise too. So.
I guess YouTube doesn't have an option to dial out, does it?
Pardon?
I'm just wondering, like the Hangout, there's no way for a Hangout you can dial out to a actual phone.
On Hangouts, you can dial out to an actual phone, and on Meet, you can dial out to an actual phone as well.
I'm just wondering if we could use a Hangout, basically set up a Hangout, which then we dial out to the Meet, and that would give you your live stream.
Yeah, we actually probably could do that.
That's that seems like something that anybody could do, as opposed to now there's a bit of a setup that needs to happen, right?
So maybe
how about we try to do a test in the next week, an update on the CTC thread, and if we can get a working demo together of doing it this way, then we can just try doing it at the next meeting.
Yeah, maybe like a subset of us who are interested in this can try to have a mock meeting next week, and we just we just have our checklist of things we're going to try. We're going to try dialing in from the phone. We're going to try streaming to YouTube. We're going to,
yeah. Because that would be good. I mean, I think anything where it's like, and the Meet, once you set it up, like any one of us could actually start the meeting and.
Yeah, so I think what we could do is a handful of us are going to be at Node Summit next week. So maybe at one point during next week, where we're all physically in the same space, we should set this up and try to do it. And like, just since we're in the same space, we can just figure out what all the edge cases of other people joining, and like just work through different edge cases of like, I'm not there, and just see what makes sense. And report back before the next meeting.
Sounds good to me.
Since Node Summit, am I?
Yeah, it's next week.
Oh, I'm wrong. Okay, great. Never mind. Yeah.
Either that or my flights are completely wrong, so I hope I'm right.
Sorry, I'm kind of lagged and tired right now. Okay, great. That sounds like an awesome plan, actually. So Miles, you're gonna take the lead on that.
Yeah, I'll take the action item, and then we'll just rally some folks at the conference next week.
Super. Okay, great. Anything else anybody needs to ask or comment on this topic? All right, if that's the case, I think we're done with 6 minutes to spare. Stick around in case anybody has any, has any private business, but otherwise let's say goodbye to the world. And
do we want to do a Q&A?
Oh my goodness. Yes, I guess we do. I'm sorry, Ali. I totally forgot about the Q&A. Hey, Q&A time. So comment in IRC or in the YouTube channel or something like that. I guess to stall for time while we collect questions, usually read off upcoming meetings. We open the calendar and see what we got. Committee meeting is happening in little more than 24 hours. The 1:30 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time tomorrow. And there's a Node.js board meeting next Tuesday, July 25th. And
I will say, if anybody has any items of concern that they want me to raise during that meeting, or anything to point out, not necessarily areas of concern, but even news to report back to the foundation.
And with that said, do we have questions?
A bunch of people say hello. Mark Hinkle says hello. There was someone who asked something about NPM, and I directed them to NPM to ask questions about that. Some people say thanks, and there's not much else. I solicited for questions already much earlier, so.
Okay, awesome. All right, well, thanks everybody, and thanks for everyone listening. Oh, and thank you, Jeremiah, for streaming, and thank you, Ali, for taking notes. And let's do it again in about 2 weeks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.